Hello all, a Knife Dow here, bringing you a knife summary of a knife I have done a review on. What are we looking at? We're looking at the Kansept Kratos. It is an O-stop held design. In fact, it says it right there on the blade. It also says Kratos, which I'm never fond of the name of the knife on the blade, or the lot number, whatever it is, the identification number for the knife on the blade. Kansept and Kaiser really like doing that. Really unnecessary. Kansept logo is here, S35VN here. It is a titanium frame lock knife, full size, definitely full size. In fact, I think this thing is a little bit over 3.5 inches, right? Oh, it's 3 3/4. It's bigger than I thought, or remembered, whichever comes first. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty sizable knife. In fact, I'm not going to call it quite large, but it's big. As I said, I have done a review on it just a while back now, and I will link that down in the description along with contact information and just the general stuff that you can find in the description on all of my knives or knife videos. Yeah. What are we looking at here? We're looking at a drop point, dual ground. I guess you could call that a Tonto, though it's a very late Tonto. It does change in angle, kind of. Yeah, it does. It's a separate grind. It's a different angle. Neither of them are super thin, but they're actually not as thick either as you might would think. I mean, it is up at the tip, but well, that's because it has to be. The grind's pretty darn low there. It's not bad here in more of the belly and the underbelly. I don't know. Something. This particular version, as you can see, has Damascus inlays on the handle. They do come in multiple different configurations. This is one that's like a little bit over $300, if I remember correctly. But the standard ones are not that much if you get them with something different in the inlay. If I remember correctly, they're pretty reasonably priced at their base version. Good access to the lock bar. Even though it's the way it sits, it kind of forces your finger to come slightly from an angle. Just based on the angles, how they meet up and everything. But it's basically from the side. It's on bearings, super ridiculously smooth. I mean, this is well above what you expect for this price point in action. It also has an internal stop pin, which is great to see. The plunge grind could be a bit better. It does basically hit the edge, but with the stop pin up there, you can always cut in a little bit more choil and improve that as time goes. Not that hard. It's got jimping. The jimping is essentially not functional. It's texture. That's what it is. Of course, the showstopper here is, aside from the Damascus, which I really like this Damascus. I haven't seen too many that have this sort of finer pattern throughout so much of it, which is kind of nice. But the big sort of I don't know what this knife reminds me of. I mean, it's called the Kratos, so I mean, game, God of War, blah blah blah, Greek, but it does remind me of kind of a Grecian blade I've seen before. I'm just not sure what off the top of my head. With this big swedge and everything, it's very nice looking. It's very distinct and very dramatic looking. The inlays are smooth, while there is some fine milling on the actual handles, but it's mostly, you're not really getting texture from it. It's really hard to pick it up. You can kind of see it in there. Can I get this from a better angle? Let's see. Yeah, there you can kind of see it. It's there, but it's so fine it's not really doing anything. So it's just a kind of a stone wash blasting. I'm not sure which one. It's genuinely hard to tell. It's because the fineness of the texturing is maybe messing that up. You have very neutral ergos. It is a slightly thicker knife. Not too thick, but it does feel like it's robust and thicker in the hand. It's partially because you also have a clip that takes up a decent chunk of the handle, so you're kind of really up on that clip, and you can kind of... I will say the clip sort of disappears, but it's still there. You're just on it, but it's super comfortable. So, wonderful there. Great tension, at least on this one. Like, it's not too tight. which this could have easily been too tight, and it's got good snap, no tap. It is countersunk, which is wonderful. There's no movement, and it's got a nice big old screw. In fact, the whole thing is basically not basically, it is held together with 2 screws. That's the entirety of your knife right there. And they're both T8s, which, yes, love that. This design's been around for a little while, but I don't know if it's something that ever got too much hype. But I like it for its simplicity, but also for the little bits of drama that it's got going on. It also has one big, huge backspacer, or not even backspacer. It's not a backspacer. It's a standoff. The one screw has a huge standoff. It's also got a lanyard loop for those who want that sort of thing, sort of protected by that giant standoff. So yeah, milling. It's not too heavy. Reasonable. It is a little butt heavy, but it is milled out on the inside. But the blade stock is, how thick is that blade stock? That's one thing I wanted to double check. 150. I'm guessing they were going for 155 thousandths there. So it's a reasonably thick blade stock, but considering how thick it is, I mean, it gets thick fast, but the actual edge, at least as you get it, this has not been sharpened, is pretty reasonable, pretty medium, which is a nice thing. It's going to get thicker quicker, but then sometimes with lower grinds and just general thickness of the blade stock, but it could have been a lot worse, is basically what I'm saying. It can definitely withstand a little bit harder use in that case. I did mention that the alt-stop pin is also internal attached to the blade, so it gives a little bit more structural stability in my opinion. And in this case, we are centered. Even though the light from this side is slightly brighter and making it look like it's off-centered, it is pretty darn close to being perfectly centered. As you can see, it lines up with the spacer there. There's no play, and the action is wonderful. I don't know what's special about these bearings, but they are just frictionless, and they have a hydraulic feel. They really do. I mean, it's for bearings, they have a hydraulic feel. It's really just, it is something special and interesting there. The one downside of this knife is the detent is extremely light. Now, I don't know if that's still the case on all of these. Well, it's not that the detent's... Let me go back for a second. The detent is probably slightly lighter than medium, but the placement of the flipper tab is also not great for leverage most of the time, unless you flip it in a very specific way. So that does lead you to that sometimes, or just even that. That may have been rectified on some of the more ones. I know they've done different versions since this was like one of the first ones that came out. First run, I got this thing when it first came out. So yeah, it may have gotten better, but from what I talked to about with the vendor who actually sold me this knife, they said all of them felt about the same in that initial run. So, or at least most of them did. So there's a chance it's got a lighter detent, but it's also partially due, as I said, to the way they designed this flipper tab. As you can see, how far that jimping goes down into between the scales, right? The flipper tab is not only slightly low in relation to the pivot, which normally you want it higher up for the maximum leverage, but it's also not that protruding. It does make for a decent guard, and it's comfortable. But the way it sits with the scales is down inside, kind of. And if you're just doing like a push button, you can kind of do it. It's not super satisfying. The basic push button, if you completely, like most of my push buttons are like this kind of, where it's a mix between a push button and an actual pull. That's not very satisfying. It's weak. It will get out. A straight down push button, you can rocket it out. No problem. It will rocket out. It has worked itself in. When I first got it, I could actually get it to pop out of the detent, but it's seemed to have worked itself in so that it doesn't pop out. So it's strong enough to hold the blade in, despite the slightly thicker blade. But that kind of flip that you might just unthinkingly do, which is the easiest kind of flip to do, is where this thing is not very satisfactory, or it's underwhelming. Basically, what you want to do is you want to either push button it, or the best way to do this is to use the flipper tab as it apparently was intended and really get in there. Like, get it engaged with as much of it as possible and light switch it. And this thing does fly out. So if you're okay with maybe changing up the way you approach this knife, knowing that it's might have that bit of a lighter detent, this is a really fun and cool knife. And I'm happy to have it, and I really like the way they did the Damascus on this inlay as much as they put on here. And a decently thick enough piece for a Damascus like that's not something to be just scoffed at for nothing. It's not bad. It's really not bad. And at S35VN, yeah, everything's good here. It's just, yeah, I could use a little more detent strength or slightly different flipper configuration. I think it's just sort of everything working against it. That super smooth detent ball that's like hydraulic feeling also causes it to, instead of do as much of a dramatic pop out of the detent, it just sort of hops and slips out of the detent. All of that coming together equals a bit of a light pull and a lacking open in certain ways. But you get used to it, and you make your adjustment for it, and it's pretty good. Overall, this is not the most practical knives, the grind and the thickness and everything, but it is a solid knife. It seems to be working fine, and it's held up, and I like it. That's what it is. I like it. It's my knife. Who cares, right? So that's all. I'm going to call the summer here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys, or whoever, in the next one. Have a great day.